welcome back. Last time we got our player attacking, and one thing I do want to add is right now, if we actually take a look at him running around, let's actually, first off, go ahead, select, oh, I have the player layer locked, select the player box, scroll all the way down here on the left, and right here where it says initially visible, let's go ahead and uncheck that. Let's go ahead and save again, hit play. So now we just see our player art on the background, but he looks a little cut out. He really needs some sort of shadow to ground him. And to make shadows a little easier, what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and actually lock the player layer here. Let's add a new layer to the top, and we will call this shadow. I'm going to go ahead and drag this under the player layer in the layers palette here, and we can go ahead and lock it. We don't actually need to mess with it over here. So now we're going to jump over to our objects layout, and we want to make a shadow for our player. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of art. Not a whole lot, it's pretty simple. We'll have to do a little art over the course of this tutorial, but everything will be done inside of Constructs Editor, kind of proving that it's not too difficult. So we will go ahead and select Sprite, and we will call this player underscore shadow. We will click, and we're going to set its size. Let's go ahead and set its size to, we want the width to be 16, which is the same as our player, and we can go ahead and set the height to 5. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this, and I think, I know there's a way to change this background. There we go. Let's make that a little lighter. My apologies if that's been hard to see this whole time, but I forgot about that button. Okay, so now we just need to draw a shadow. Not too hard. We will select our pencil tool here. Let's go ahead and pick a black color. So we can go ahead and make this black. So right now we have a red, green, blue of 0, 0, 0 and an alpha of 255. We don't want our shadow to be solid black, of course, because shadows never are. So we're going to go ahead and change the alpha. Let's go ahead and change this down to 150. I think that should work. So honestly, the easiest way I found to do this is go ahead, select the paint bucket tool, paint the whole thing in, then we'll select the erase tool. Make sure your size is set to 1, your hardness is set to 1, and we're just going to come up and take out 2 pixels of all the corners. Now we have our player's shadow. Pretty simple. We can go ahead and close this, and now we can see this will sit under him, but it doesn't actually line up because of our image points. So we're good on that one. All we need to do is actually add one behavior. We will add a behavior to the shadow behavior, and we will add pin. But we need a place to actually have this spawn in and stick to before we can pin it. So if we actually look at our player here, our player box, unlock player, if we double click, our origin point is up here in the top left. We can actually add more origin points, which is what we're going to do. So we will go into the edit image points, right click, add a new image point. It's now putting it in the center, which is not quite what we want. We want to right click, quick assign to the bottom. Again, that could be 2 on the number pad keyboard, and go ahead and close this. Now we're going to jump over into eGame, go back up to our on start of layout. So let me actually move, I like to have these at the top of my event sheets because it's a little easier to see and keep track of. So on start of layout, right now we are having the player box spawn the player art and then pinning it. We're going to do the same thing. So we will have an add an action, player box, spawn another object. We will spawn player shadow on layer shadow, which will put it below the other ones, and at image point 1. And then just like we did with player art, we will add another action, player shadow, scroll on down to pin, pin to object, pin to player box, and position. Done. Now if we actually go and look at the game, we should see a little bit more. Now it actually looks like he's standing on ground. I think that works a little bit better for me. It makes me a little nicer with the way it looks. Perfect. Okay. So now that we have the shadow in, that's just a minor nitpicky thing. We'll be putting shadows on other things, so I just wanted to keep it looking grounded. Now let's go ahead and add in our rocks and solid objects. So right click first, add layer to top. So our new layer will be called level. And this will just be all of our level objects. So we can make sure we are selected on the level layer, double click, scroll on down to tile background. So first thing we're going to do is just our standard rocks. So let's just do solid rock underscore rock. Add this. We will go ahead and open a file. We will go still in the Tiny Adventure Pack, Other, Miscellaneous, Rock, and click Open. Okay, now the thing about the rock is it's actually 15 by 15, which is not the right size for our grid. So we're going to go ahead and change this to 16 by 16 by resizing. This is one of the actual occasions, let me undo here, you do not want to have stretch available. So go ahead and do align top left, change this to 16 by 16. Don't need to worry about keep aspect ratio, and make sure smooth is unchecked. And now we'll click OK. And as you can see, it expanded our box around it to the right. And that's fine. We'll go ahead and stick with it like that. The next thing we need to do actually is draw a shadow for the rock here. So grab your pencil tool, make sure you have your color selected, so 000 and alpha of 150. You just don't want to have darker shadows for some things than others. So all we have to do is just draw along the bottom here. And hey, look at that. Our rock now has a shadow. We can go ahead and close this. And as you can see, we have a lot of rocks here. But what this will allow us to do is actually draw out a whole section if we need to build walls. And we can do this vertically as well. Just like so. So this is a great way to make a little arena that now we have to stay inside of. And to move things around, if you want, you can just hold down Control to actually drag out new instances of it. So, and with Snap to Grid, it actually snaps us to exactly the right size every single time. But now, if we do this, we'll be able to walk right through these. There's nothing preventing us from doing that. So let's go ahead and select it. Go to Behavior, Add New Behavior, and we will call this and add a solid. And that's pretty much all we have to do for the basic rock. So if we open this up, we can now see I can't move past any of these rocks, which is exactly how we want this. Perfect. And you know what? I'm looking at it. I think my player shadow is a little bit too large. So before we start adding in anything else, let's go back to Object real fast, open this up, and all we need to do is select our eraser tool, drag down this left side, drag down this side, and just bring everything in by one. Let me double check and make sure that looks all right for me. Yeah, that looks a lot nicer. Okay, so now it's time to add in our moving rocks. And these ones we're going to have to set up a little bit differently. So, well, we actually have to make some changes here. So we will double click, scroll on down to Sprite. Let's just I call these just MR for Move Rock. Insert. And click. And now let's go ahead and go to File. And we will select the same rock that we had before. This is actually a thing that I have changed within this pack, so we just have a differentiator between the different rocks. You can pick whatever color you want here. I have actually written down the colors I need. They are in hex, so I'm going to go ahead and down here at the bottom left, I'm going to select hex. Make my alpha 255 again, which is full opacity. And for our first color, let's go ahead and just make this. It is EFF0F4. And it's kind of like a whitish color. We will select our fill tool, turn flood fill off, and I'm going to select the lightest color, which is that center color there. All right, let's do the next color, which is CED0DE. And this is our mid-tone color, which will be right here. And our last color will be A3A7C2. And also, with these ones, we also need to change the size and give it a shadow. So let's go ahead and change the size to 16 by 16. And again, we need to draw the shadow. I changed all my colors here. Let's go ahead and just set it to black. In hex, all zeros is black. And back to 150 of an alpha. Grab our pencil tool. And once again, just draw along the bottom. Now, with the alpha done, if you go back over a space, you see how it can get darker. So just be careful when you're drawing it out. If that happens, make sure you undo and redo it again. Just like so. Okay, so that's all we need in the move rocks for animation. They don't actually really animate here. So we can go ahead and close this out now. And now we see this actually sits in. Oh, I forgot. Double click, go back in. One thing we need to do, change its hitbox for one. So you see it's trying to think that its hitbox is that. That's not correct. Right click, set bounding box. And once again, to avoid collisions, especially since these are kind of moving around, I'm going to select these bottom two, move them up two, and do this with all of them. Because we're using the tile movement for everything, this will have this will be moving with tile movement as well. Having exact bounding boxes doesn't matter because it's checking the whole space that the bounding box moves into. So we can go ahead and set this like this. And then we're going to want to go ahead, head over to our origin point, set our origin point to the top left. Again, hit 7 on the number pad or right click, top left. And then we want one more image point. So we will add new image point. And let's go ahead and leave that in the center, except that we're over a little bit. So where it spawns here, just move it over one. It can't really be in the exact center. I mean, I guess we could do X 7.5. Let's go ahead and do that. Why not? Let's give it a try. And close. So now this will set in line with everything else. All right, so now it's time to add some instance variables and behaviors. So make sure you have the move rock selected, add instance variable, and we are going to add our first instance variable, which will be moving, and that will be a Boolean. So we want to know if the rock is actually moving. Add one more. This one will be dir, and this will be a string. And then we will come down to behaviors. We will actually be adding the tile movement behavior here like we did with the player. So we will add that. And like with the player, we want to set up the grid width to be 16 by 16 and its speed to be 50 by 50. And we can also turn off default controls because we don't want the player controlling the rocks independently. Make sure you hit save, and let's see if we can make this work. Okay, and there's one little flavor thing that I like to add is when you hit the rock, I like to have a little whoosh come out the back end. So we will have that be spawning on the level. So what we're going to do is go back over to Object. We are going to double click. We will add a new sprite. We will call it whoosh. We will select. So right click on animation frames, import frames from files this time because these animations are not in a single frame. We will go back to our Rock Smasher tutorial, the effects pack 01. We will go to effect 03 and we're going to be using frames 29 to 44. And we can go ahead and click open. Now it's going to be hard to see. Here's one of the benefits of flipping this into dark. Now we can actually see all of these. But the first frame actually, unlike when you import a strip, there is no option to remove the first frame. So we're going to want to go to frame 0 first off and just hit delete. Now, if we actually look at our animation here, let's set its speed to 20 and we don't want it to loop. But let's go ahead and take a look and see what it looks like. So we can see it's just a little poof. And that'll just pop out from under the rock to kind of give a little emphasis to it moving. So we can go ahead and close that. All right, so now that we have this moving, we need to move the origin point because I want it to actually come out from where the actual animation starts originating. So we're going to go ahead and set this to, I have this written down, of 48 for the X and 43 for the Y. That puts us right here at the point. Right click, apply to all animations or whole animations. It doesn't really matter since there's only one. Okay, and we make sure our speed is set to 20, and we can close this down. Now, this thing is huge. This is actually designed at a very different scale from our actual 16 by 16 players, but we'll shrink it down in a minute. First off, we're going to add a behavior. So first behavior, new behavior, fade. We're going to leave the fade in time and the wait time to 0, and fade out time will be 0.5, so it will actually fade out and destroy itself because we're going to leave that checked within half a second. So that means it will spawn in, whoosh, and automatically take care of destroying itself for us. We don't have to worry about it. It is rather large. We will deal with resetting that in the actual code. So let me just move that off to the side for now, and we can not worry about it. Let's go ahead and hit save. Now let's jump into the actual move rock code, which is going to get a little crunchy and going to be a little fun. One last thing, we have the behavior of tile movement for the move rock. I also forgot we need to have solid behavior when it is not moving. So actually we want to have it defaulted as a solid. So we will uncheck enabled on tile movement and make sure on solid it is left as enabled. So what we're going to do now is go over to eGame. Let's go ahead and right click and we will set a new group, and this will be Move Rock. We will hit B for a new blank sub-event. And now we want to see if the player attack is overlapping another object, and that object would be Move Rock. We also want to make sure that the Move Rock is not moving, so we're going to hit C to add another condition. We will check Move Rock. We will scroll on down to Is Boolean Set Moving. And again, like we do a lot of times, we want to invert this, so we hit I on the keyboard. So now if the player box is overlapping the Move Rock and the Move Rock is not moving, we are first going to add action, Move Rock. We are going to disable solids. So go down to Solid, Set Enabled, Set Disabled. And now we're going to have the rock moving in a couple different directions. So we're going to go B for a new blank sub-event. So what's happened, it's going to overlap, set it to disabled, and then decide which way it's moving based on the hitbox. So we will double click, check attack box, scroll on down to compare instance variable, and we're going to be comparing the hit direction. So if the hit direction is equal to right, we're going to have something happen. And we're just going to do all of right first, and then we'll do the other ones because it's a lot easier to just copy and paste out. So if we hit it right, we need to have the rock check the grid next to itself to make sure it can move. B for a new blank sub-event. It's my favorite key when I work in Construct, if you can't tell. Double click. We are going to go to MR for Move Rock. We will scroll on down to Can Move To in the Tile Movement section. So right here, Tile Movement, Can Move To. Double click. And now we're checking on the X and Y. And what we want to check, this isn't X and Y in terms of its actual position. This is the grid column. Not sure how to describe this best, but basically a grid is made on the layer. So let me see if I can explain this in a somewhat clear way. Let me go and turn on Show Grid. And let's unlock players so I can move. So right now, we are locked into the grid, and the grid breaks everything up into rows and columns. Right now, I am technically on row 0, column 0, because the player is in the top left here. If I'm here now, I'm technically in rows 1, column 1, and so on. And that actually starts at the top left and moves its way all the way around. It's really hard to know which column you're specifically in, like what number it is. So technically here I would be in column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm in column 6. I'm not going to know where the player is when they attack. So what we want to do is check. So we're going to double click again. Let's go back in Move Rock, Can Move To, and we are going to check Self, which is itself, the Move Rock, dot Tile Movement. So we're going to call into the tile movement behavior, dot Grid X. So that now pulls what part of the grid we're in. So when it's checking, it's now checking the current X position in the grid that we're at. Because we want it to move right, we actually need to do +1 and make sure it can still move to the right. We also want it to stay on the same y-axis while it's moving to the right. So we will just do self.tileMovement.gridY, and we can go ahead and leave that at that. So once that happens, we will go ahead and add action to set Move Rock. We are going to set its Boolean, moving to true, because we don't want to have this become true if it can't move. So once it checks to the right and makes sure it can move, it will set this to true, and then we will set its direction, Move Rock, set value of dir, and we will just make it right since we're here. There is more efficient ways to go about this, but for clarity, I found this is probably the best place to start. So if you know a better way to do these and have this all kind of work with functions, go for it, enjoy. But hopefully this is helps other people understand how to use the tile movement mechanics. So we're going to spawn the whoosh. So have Move Rock, spawn another object. We will spawn whoosh. For now, let's go ahead and we will just spawn it on the player layer. It's going to disappear right away, so it's not a big issue, and we will have it spawn on image point 1. And because we're going to need to flip the whoosh around a whole bunch as we go, we're just going to make sure that whoosh is set to not mirrored. So go into whoosh, set mirrored, set not mirrored. Okay, so that's basically if the move rock can move. If it can't move, though, we want to hit X for an else. So this means if this cannot move, this is going to happen. We are going to add a wait. So go to System, Wait. We will wait 0.3 seconds. Then we will set move rock, set Boolean, moving to false. Just double check and make sure that that goes to false. We will go to move rock, down to set value of dir, and we will just set that to nothing. And we will make sure that we go to move rock, solid, set enabled. So now that means that when move rock is set, it should move to the right. Well, actually, we don't have anything telling it to move yet. So right now, that's just all the things we need to actually set up to have it move. It won't actually move. We have nothing in here telling it to move yet. But let's go ahead and get all these directions set in first. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse this, copy, paste. Now we will do direction of left. In our grid, we want this to be checking the grid -1, because that will be to the left. Set moving to true. Set direction to left. Whoosh will spawn, and whoosh will actually be set to mirrored this time because we want to have it animating going the opposite direction, and everything else gets to stay the same. So we can collapse this, select the whole thing, copy, paste. Now we're going to do up. And we will check in here in our grid. Delete this, grid Y. Now, because we're moving along the y-axis, which is up and down, since we are moving, I set this to up, right? Yes, up. This will be y -1, because again, up is negative. We will set the direction to up. Everything else is the same. So we can close that, and last but not least, we have down. So we will change the direction of down. Double click. This will now be +1 or +1. Change the direction to down. And that should be all we have to do here for now. But I know we want to actually make the thing move, right? So in order to do that, we need to make sure we call the one specifically moving. So let's go ahead, select the whole group again, B for a new blank sub-event. You can also just do add event to move rock. B is just my go-to. I use it constantly. We're going to double click. We're going to go to System, and we're going to go to for each. So you can just start typing it in, for each. For each move rock. So for each move rock, we're going to check a couple of things. So now we're going to go B, new blank sub-event, double click, move rock. And the first thing we want to check is whether move is set to true. So is Boolean instance variable set? Is moving true? So if moving is true, now we need to know what direction it is. So B. So if moving is true, and move rock, compare instance variable, if direction is equal to right. Oh, let me make that correct because capitalization does matter and when it's checking. So if move rock is set to right, we're basically going to be doing the same kind of checks we have up here. So B for a new blank sub-event, we can actually go ahead and just pull this from up here if we like, but just so I don't confuse anyone, let's go ahead and just do it once again. Double click, move rock, can move to, and again, we are going to be checking self.tileMovement.gridX, because we're on the X, and since we're moving to the right, we are going to be checking a +1. And then again for Y needs to be self.tileMovement.gridY. So if there is no space to the right, perfectly fine. Move rock, come on down, simulate controls, and we will simulate pressing right. Again, once we run into another block and it cannot keep moving, we need to make sure it can stop. So we will hit X for an else statement. So if there is no space to the right that it can move to, we want to have this happen, which is basically the same thing we have up here. So we will have a weight of 0.3. Then we will add an action of move rock. We will be setting the Boolean of moving to false. Then move rock. We will set dir to nothing, set value, dir to nothing, and we will set its solid to enabled. So that should be everything we need to have to make it move right. Let's go ahead and test it out and see if it works. So now, if I'm a player and I move up to it and I hit the rock, well, it made the whoosh, but nothing moved. So let's go ahead and figure out why that is. Oh, I know why it didn't move, and it's because of something I did, of course. I actually set the tile movement to not be enabled, and I forgot we can actually leave that enabled. We didn't actually re-enable the movement anywhere in here, but we can go ahead and leave that enabled, and it shouldn't actually be a problem now that I'm looking at it. So we have a solid, we can't move through it, we can't move around it, but if we smack it, there it goes. All right, we definitely need to change its speed. Its speed should actually be 100. I had it the same speed as the player, which is not correct. So let's go back in for my little screw up here. If we check our move rock, let's go ahead and just make sure that your grid width and height is 16 by 16. Your speed for X and Y is both 100. It is set to enabled with that checked. Default controls is not checked. Isometric is not checked. That's what we need to do. So now, as we see, we can go ahead and play. We can walk up to it, hit it, it creates the whoosh, and it shoots over. So now we got to do a couple of things. The whoosh is far too large. So let's make a quick little sub event. So we can go to add event to move rock. This is just a quick little thing. Go to whoosh, and what we need to do is on created. So you can start typing in on created, add action, whoosh, and start typing in scale. We're going to set scale to 0.5. So we're going to set it to half of the size that it actually is. Go ahead and save, and let's see if that works. That looks a lot better. You couldn't see it too much. It might not be big enough. Let's go ahead and do 0.75. There we go. You can see it kind of overlay the player there. Our actual hitbox is kind of in the way now. So like we did with our player box, you can go ahead and select. You can either come into objects and select it, or select it over here in the projects panel. Come on down to initially visible and uncheck that, because we don't actually need to see it, we just need to have it do stuff. So let's see if we can see our whoosh now. Whoosh, there we go. And the block moved and stopped, and it should be re-enabled. So solid is re-enabled when it hit the wall over here. And we can't keep hitting it because there's no space for it to move over here, and we can't hit it in any other direction because we haven't set that up yet. So let's set that up. I'm just going to move whoosh up here so it's out of the way and not distracting. So we need to work with this whole section here. I like to always just collapse it, select the whole section, and if you copy and paste it, it actually opens up the whole thing, but just on the new one you copied. And now we need to set this up for the other directions. So real simple setup. We just need to change this to, let's go ahead and go with left for now. We will double click. We need to make this negative on the X, simulate pressing left, and everything else is the same. So go ahead, take a second, look at that. Excellent. Collapse that, and 2 more times for up and down. So let's go ahead and do up first. Tile movement, once again, now we don't need to be checking on the x-axis of the grid, we need to be checking on the y. And since we're moving up, once again, it is -1. And we will simulate pressing up. Go ahead and close that down real fast. Open up the next one. And down. Double click. And now it is positive on the Y. Simulate pressing down. Save. Now one thing we're going to run into is our whooshes are going to be a little off. So up here, if we go back in to where we are spawning our whoosh, we can see we are setting things mirrored and not mirrored on the up and down. That's not actually what we need. So we can go ahead and delete that and delete that. So on up, we want the direction because currently it shoots off to the left as if the object is moving to the right. So we need to angle that in an upward direction. So what we need to do is come in to up. If it can move, spawn the whoosh, add action, whoosh, come on down to, oh, not down, sorry, go to set angle, and we are going to set its angle to 270. And then on down, we can go ahead and grab this, control drag, put it down here, and we are going to set its angle to 90. So now it should whoosh out in the direction we want it to go. I'll put a little image up on the screen here of the actual orientations for the way it works. Okay, let's go ahead and go to game. Let's throw in a couple more of these just to see, and we will save and hit play. Now our player can move around. He can hit this block. It goes to the right like we knew it did. This one will go down. Excellent. Let's try hitting one up. That moves up. And what if we hit it to the left? Perfect. So that's pretty much all we need to do to get the move rocks working. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know that was a bit long and a bit grindy on getting everything in, but it's a cool effect. So I'll see you guys next time, and thanks for watching.